Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna. This is Coffee, Books, and Bullet Journal, and today I'm going to talk to you about some audiobooks that I love. Okay, so new background. It's temporary. I am in a hotel today. I have been for a couple of days. I'm going to be for the part of this week, essentially. I am driving all over the freaking place. It's October 20th. I have put 2,300 miles on my car since October 1st. So, yeah. I drive a lot. You know this. My job requires me to drive a ton, and because of that, I listen to a crap ton of audiobooks. Looking at my stats for 2020 so far, of the 109 books that I have read so far this year, 55 of them have been audiobooks. So, about half. Which is a lot of audiobooks. I use a variety of different platforms, from Audible to Scribd, my library, Hoopla, and my latest favorite, which is Libro FM. I've got links for all of it down below. You can check them out. Scribd, I think, is like $8.99 a month, and you get unlimited audiobooks. They kind of cap out the new releases after 3-ish. Libro is the same price as Amazon, but it supports local bookshops, and you can actually pick which bookstore you want that money to go to. So I support King's English Bookshop, which is in Salt Lake City. And then Hoopla is like if your library supports it. I have to do this because I have so many audiobooks. And I get them from a wide variety of platforms. Now that NetGalley has audiobooks, I also use their platform as well. I don't love that audiobook platform as much. It's just not as user-friendly. But you get them early, so that's always a good thing as well. However, we're not talking about that today. I do have a video on how to read more, and I'll link that up in the cards. One of those two. I can never remember which corner it is, especially in new locations. That talks about how to read more and how to use audiobook services. So definitely check that out if you are interested. But today I'm just going to be giving you some audiobook recommendations. Now, I am not one of those people that doesn't like certain genres or prefers certain genres when listening to an audiobook. I can do it all. Some people really don't like thrillers as audio. I don't mind them. Really? I just don't. I mean, I guess it's probably not one that I read as much, but there are certain ones that definitely, I think, work better as thrillers, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Fantasy, I actually think that I prefer audiobooks to physical books because a lot of times, like, you can be daunting when you're like, oh my god, this is like a 500, 600, 700 page book. But when it's on audio, you kind of feel a little bit more productive. For instance, right now I'm listening to Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I was on page 82 yesterday, and then with my 5-hour drive today, I got to page 250, which is like halfway through the book. And I was like, yes, that's great. Now, I hesitate to pick this one up and talk to you about. I was just kind of giving it as an example. I do not recommend this audiobook, for the sole reason of the beginning of every chapter has this like fairy tale or in like myth or legend or something like that, and there's underlying music, which is fine if you're listening to it at 1x speed. Not if you're listening to it at 1.5 or 2 or 2.5 speed. So I don't recommend this one as an audio. But that's just an example. So I do have 3 or 4 books in 5 different genres that I'm going to share with you guys. I obviously don't have the books because I'm in a hotel, so I will just put up a picture here and we'll go ahead and get started. So the first genre is contemporary, and there are a few of them. A lot of them have to do with verse, and that is why I love them in audio. So the first one is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I actually recommend all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books on audio because she narrates them. This one, though, I think is the best of the three. There are two narrators because there are 2 points of view, so she only narrates one of the characters. But she just brings this extra level of greatness to her stories, to her narration. It's beautiful, and when you do it in verse, she was the one that wrote these words, and so like she knows how they're supposed to be said, and it's just, oh, so good. So good. Her debut novel was The Poet X, and that one is also in verse. Highly recommend that in audio. The second one is With the Fire on High. This was a book told in like normal novel format. I don't know what that's called. Blanking right now. Anyways, but it was still really good on audio. And then now Clap When You Land. So good. The next one that is also a book in verse is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. And this, again, is narrated by Dean Atta, so he knows the language, he knows the words. It was just an absolute pleasure to listen to this book. And, like, I got goosebumps. Like, it was so good. I cannot recommend this book enough. And I highly recommend it on audio. I have talked about this book and Clap When You Land a ton this year, so I'm not going to go into detail about the synopsis. Just know that if you are planning on reading it, the audiobook is definitely the way to go. Another one that kind of deals with verse and music, I guess, is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. The main character is a rapper, and in the audiobook, she actually raps parts of it, and I think that had I just read it physically, I wouldn't have gotten the same effect as listening to it on audio and getting that same story. So that's another one I highly recommend. Now, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas is also amazing on audio. It doesn't quite have the same requirement or necessity to listen to it on audio as On the Come Up does, but it's still super powerful, and the narrator is phenomenal. And then the last contemporary that I have is probably one of the few probably on here that I would recommend only listening to the audio, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book that is told in like an interview format, and if you're reading it physically, it gets really dry and really boring because there is no description, there is no world building or anything like that. It's all done in like short snippet interviews from the band members. However, when you listen to it on audio, it is a full cast, including, why can't I think of her name? She plays Phoebe on Friends. Why can't I think of her name? Anyway, she's one of the characters, or one of the narrators. And it's a phenomenal recording. But if you were reading it physically, like, you would not get the same out of it. So if you're going to read this book, do it on audio. Okay, so I have a couple of science fiction recommendations. The first being from the same author duo, and that is the Illuminae Files and Aurora Rising and Aurora Burning. This is actually, for the most part, the same cast of characters, which kind of messes you up a little bit when you're, like, hearing Aiden's voice as another character in Aurora Rising. Like, it messes you up a little, but that's okay. Illuminae specifically, because it's told in mixed media, it is a phenomenal audiobook. In fact, this is one that I recommend that you listen along with physically reading it at the same time, because there are some things in the physical book that you won't get out of the audiobook, and some things out of the audiobook that you won't get out of the physical. So this is one that reading in tandem is the way to go. That's how you do it. There are parts during Illuminae where Aiden, who is the AI, is the point of view character, and he is talking about one of Mozart's, I think it was Mozart's, requiems, and how he was playing it through the speaker system of the spaceship to calm the crewmen as they were dying, and then you hear it very faintly as he speaks. You hear that requiem, and it is just so good. I just, like, blew me away. I love it. Aiden, whoever plays the character or the narrator that plays Aiden, is phenomenal. I need to find whatever else he does, because, like, his voice, oh my goodness. Anyway, that's a tangent, I guess, but you know what I'm trying to say there. You might be able to hear the heat blowing over there. I'm sorry. I don't know. I hope this works. but it's freezing cold. Aurora Rising and Aurora Burning are the second series that Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman are writing. Like I said, it has a lot of the same narrators and the same actors, so it's phenomenal. It's full cast and definitely a trip and a half. Moving on to the thriller genre. And these ones are thrillers that have that extra something to it that just puts it over the top in the aspect of the audiobooks. So for the first two, they have a podcast element, and you can hear the parts of the podcast throughout the audiobook. So the first one is The Night Swim by Megan Golden. I just recently read this, and every other chapter or every third chapter, I think, has like the actual podcast episode with the music and the introduction and the, like, it's so good. It's so well done that you actually think you're listening to a podcast. And so if a podcast is your buzzword, please, for the love of all things holy, pick up this book and do it on audio. Another one that does a podcast element really well is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is kind of the young adult version of that. And it is about this girl who has a podcast. And this one's really cool because in the audiobook, they're doing an interview with, I can't remember who it was, but they were doing it in a coffee shop, and you could hear the coffee shop sounds in the background. And so it just kind of like made it that much more real. And it was like very, very well done. The production value of it was really top notch. And then another one that we have is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. And this one doesn't have a podcast element in it, but it does have a book, like a book within a book, because you're the split timeline with the book and the horror crime, true horror, I guess, about this girl's 20-day stay in this haunted house. And then back and forth from when this girl was an adult and she has inherited the house and has to kind of figure out, was that book real? This book is so terrifying that listening to it on audio was just so good. I listened to probably 75% of it on the drive home from one of these long 4-hour road trips. It was so good. I was so engrossed. There are some times when I'm doing these trips where I'll listen to an audiobook for an hour or two and then I get bored, and so I need to put on music or put on a podcast or something like that to kind of engage my brain again, essentially. This book I listened to the entire 4.5 hours home. Did not stop, did not put it down, just went the whole way. And when I got home, I was like, wow, okay. So this is definitely one that will keep you engaged, and that book is terrifying. Now we have a few fantasy choices. One of my favorite narrators, and she does everything from science fiction to fantasy to contemporary. I think she's done pretty much everything, is Rebecca Solaire. And she did the Caraval audiobooks, and that was probably the reason why I enjoyed that series so much, because I listened to all 3 of them on audio on road trips, so it was all in one binge read. And that was one that when I got done reading those books, I was seeing these mixed reviews of people that didn't really like the book. And I was like, I was really invested in it. I really liked it. And I think what it was, because I haven't gone back to reread it, so I don't know. I haven't tested this hypothesis, but I think the audiobook was one of the reasons why I loved this series so much, because I love Rebecca Solaire. She's so good. She also does The Renegades, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure she does the Renegades trilogy, which is also why I enjoyed the second 2 in that series more than the first, because I physically read the first one and listened to the second 2 on audio. Another favorite narrator of mine is January Lavoie, and she does a lot of the fantasy world. the two that I can think of off the top of my head that she does that I really enjoyed were the Diviner series. She's the narrator for that. She is also the narrator for the 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, which was another really good audiobook. One of the things I really love about specifically fantasy-based audiobooks is when the atmosphere is very strong. So one of the ones that I really loved that I read last year was The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta. This is a very witchy autumnal book, and the audiobook I think gave it that extra level of just like, I don't know what the word is, kind of cozy but also like very spooky vibe to it, and I don't think that I would have gotten the same out of it had it been a physical book. Then the last one is definitely a favorite of mine. This is how I read the book the first time. I read it specifically, or I picked it up specifically because Jim Dale narrates it. He's one of the narrators that does Harry Potter. I don't read the Harry Potter books anymore, but that's okay. That is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Again, a very atmospheric book, and probably one of the reasons I loved that book the first time so much and why it means so much to me. I have gone back and read it physically, but the audiobook was phenomenal. And that book actually is a little bit confusing just in general, and that's just how Erin Morgenstern is. So if you do typically enjoy reading fantasy on audio, I do highly recommend that one. If you're not one that listens to fantasy on audio, don't do this one, because you will get lost very quickly if you can't keep focused. Okay, and then I want to talk about a couple of memoirs and nonfiction. And that is because generally the authors are the ones that narrate these. And so again, they know the words, they know the inflections and what should be focused on. And it just kind of gives a whole other life to their story, because like it feels like they're just kind of telling you their life story. The first one is Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. She was in Pitch Perfect and has also done things in the Twilight universe and some other stuff. And so this is just kind of the story of her life and how she got to where she is now. Anna Kendrick is hilarious. And so the audiobook, again, she does narrate it, and so good. So good. Another couple of memoirs that are phenomenal. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. He's the host of The Daily Show, and the reason why it's called Born a Crime, he was born in South Africa during apartheid, and his mother either slept with or married. I can't remember if they were married, but anyway, she was with a white man, so he is mixed race, and that was a crime. So he was literally born a crime. Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. Actually, really all of Carrie Fisher's memoirs are really good. I mean, she does narrate all of them, but this one is really, really good. This was the last thing that she did prior to her passing, and her daughter actually narrates part of it, which is really cool. And this one, the writing style, I feel like is a whole lot better than Wishful Drinking, but both of them, the audiobook is spot on. Then the last book that I have is a true crime, and everyone has heard about this one. Everyone was talking about it a couple of years ago, but this kind of has that same podcast feel to it, and that is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, and this is the story of trying to find the Golden State Killer. And this is dark and ominous and creepy, but just fascinating if you are at all interested in true crime. All right, so those are some of my favorite audiobooks. I figured with all of the driving that I am doing right now, there was no better time than now to talk about some of these things. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite audiobook has been this year. Let's do that. What was your favorite audiobook this year? Let me know down in the comments. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there is a little red button that you can do so down below the video, and all of the other links to my social media will be in the description below if you would like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. What makes this heart beat faster?